In just 33 seconds, a single comment would turn a routine interview into the most explosive moment in daytime television history. This is the story of how Prince Harry got himself kicked off Mark Consuelos' show after a heated altercation that left audiences absolutely stunned. It was supposed to be a simple interview. Mark Consuelos, the beloved talk show host known for his warm personality and genuine conversations, had invited Prince Harry to discuss his latest charitable endeavors. The studio audience was buzzing with excitement. People had lined up for hours just to get a seat. They wanted to see the prince up close, to hear his stories, to connect with someone they had only seen in photographs and news clips. Mark walked onto the stage with his signature smile, waving to the crowd as the applause filled the studio. He had done this hundreds of times before. He knew how to make guests feel comfortable, how to ask the right questions, how to keep the conversation flowing naturally. But today, something would be different. Today, he would face a challenge, unlike anything he had experienced in his career. Prince Harry entered from stage left, and the audience erupted. The cheers were deafening. People stood up, their phones already out, ready to capture every moment. Harry walked across the stage with confidence, his hand raised in acknowledgement. But there was something in his expression, something that Mark noticed right away, a certain edge, a tension that seemed to hover around him like a shadow. They shook hands, both men smiling for the cameras, and took their seats. Mark began with the usual pleasantries, thanking Harry for coming, asking about his flight, making small talk to ease into the interview. Harry responded, but his answers were short, clipped. There was none of the warmth that Mark usually pulled from his guests within the first few minutes. Mark leaned forward, trying to establish a connection. So, Harry, I want to talk about the amazing work you have been doing with mental health awareness. Can you tell our audience what inspired you to focus on this particular cause? Harry shifted in his seat, crossing his legs in a way that seemed almost dismissive. Well, Mark, I think the real question is why more people in positions like yours are not using their platforms to address these issues. You have this show, this audience, and what are you really doing with it? The studio went quiet. Mark blinked, taken aback by the sudden shift in tone. This was not how interviews were supposed to go. The guest was supposed to answer questions, not turn them back on the host with an accusatory edge. But Mark, ever the professional, kept his composure. I appreciate that perspective, Mark said carefully. We actually do quite a bit of work with various charities and organizations. But this interview is about you and your initiatives. I would love to hear more about what you have planned for the coming year. Harry let out a small laugh, but there was no humor in it. Of course you would. That is what this is all about, is it not? Getting me to talk so you can boost your ratings. Classic American television. All surface, no substance. The audience exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some people were still smiling, unsure if this was some kind of planned bit, some kind of joke they were not in on yet. But Mark knew better. This was real. Harry was not playing along. He was challenging him, right there, in front of hundreds of people and countless viewers at home. Mark took a breath, maintaining his calm exterior. Harry, I assure you, that is not what this is about. I invited you here because I genuinely admire the work you have been doing. I think our audience would benefit from hearing your story, from understanding your mission. That is all. Your audience, Harry repeated, emphasizing the words like they left a bad taste in his mouth. Let me tell you something about audiences, Mark. They do not really care. They just want entertainment. They want drama. And you are giving it to them by having me sit here and perform like some kind of trained SEAL. Now the tension in the room was palpable. The camera operators glanced at each other, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut away. The producers in the control room were frantically discussing what to do. This was spiraling fast. Mark could feel it, but he refused to let Harry derail everything he had built. Harry, I understand that you have strong opinions, Mark said, his voice steady but firm. "But I have to say, I find it disappointing that you would come onto my show and immediately attack the very platform you agreed to appear on. If you did not want to be here, you did not have to accept the invitation." Harry leaned back, his arms crossed. "Oh, here we go. The host gets defensive. Cannot handle a little bit of honesty, can you? This is exactly the problem with people like you. You want everyone to play nice, to follow your script, to make you look good." "Well, I am not interested in making you look good, Mark." Mark felt his jaw tighten. He had interviewed difficult guests before. People who were nervous, people who were guarded, people who were unprepared. But this was different. This was not nervousness or discomfort. This was arrogance. This was entitlement. And Mark was not going to let it slide. "Harry, with all due respect, I do not need you to make me look good," Mark said, his tone shifting ever so slightly. Still professional, but now with an undercurrent of strength. "I have been doing this job for years, and I have earned the respect of my audience and my peers by treating people with dignity and giving them a fair platform to share their stories. What you are doing right now is not honest. It is disrespectful." The audience was dead silent now. Every eye in the room was locked on the two men sitting across from each other. Harry uncrossed his arms and leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Disrespectful?" Harry said, his voice rising. "You want to talk about disrespect? Do you have any idea what it is like to live under constant scrutiny? To have every single thing you do analyzed and criticized? To have your entire life turned into a spectacle for people like you to profit from?" Mark did not back down. "I cannot imagine what that is like, Harry. And I have sympathy for what you have been through. But that does not give you the right to come here and belittle me or my audience. We are not your enemy. I am not your enemy. I am trying to have a conversation with you, and you are refusing to meet me halfway." Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The sudden movement sent a ripple of shock through the studio. People gasped. Mark remained seated, his eyes fixed on Harry, waiting to see what would happen next. "You know what, Mark?" Harry said, his voice sharp and cutting. "I do not need this. I do not need to sit here and be lectured by someone who has no idea what real pressure is. You sit in your comfortable studio, asking your safe little questions, pretending to care about issues that you will forget about the moment the cameras stop rolling. You are a fraud. This whole thing is a fraud." That was the moment everything changed. The moment when Mark knew that this interview could not continue. He had given Harry every opportunity to reset, to find common ground, to salvage the conversation. But Harry had pushed too far. He had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Mark stood up slowly, his face calm but his eyes fierce. The audience held its breath. No one knew what was about to happen, but everyone could feel the weight of the moment. "Harry," Mark said quietly, his voice carrying through the silent studio, "I have tried to be patient with you. I have tried to give you the benefit of the doubt. But you have made it clear that you have no interest in having a respectful conversation. So I'm going to ask you, very politely, to leave my stage." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Harry stared at Mark, his mouth slightly open, as if he could not believe what he had just heard. The audience was frozen, utterly stunned by what was unfolding in front of them. "Excuse me?" Harry said, his voice dripping with disbelief. "You heard me," Mark said, his tone unwavering. "This is my show. This is my stage. And I am not going to stand here and let you disrespect me, my team, or the people who came here today to see a genuine conversation. If you cannot treat us with basic decency, then you need to leave." Harry laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound. "You are kicking me off your show? Do you know who I am?" "Yes, I know exactly who you are," Mark replied. "But that does not give you a free pass to act like this. Everyone deserves respect, Harry. Even talk show hosts. Even the people you seem to think are beneath you. For a long moment, Harry just stood there, his face red, his fists clenched at his sides. He looked like he wanted to say something, to fire back with another cutting remark, but no words came. The reality of the situation was sinking in. He had gone too far, and now there was no way back. "Fine," Harry finally said, his voice low and cold. "I do not need this circus anyway." He turned and walked off the stage, his footsteps echoing in the silent studio. No one clapped. No one cheered. They all just watched as he disappeared behind the curtain, leaving Mark standing alone in the center of the stage. Mark took a deep breath and turned to face the audience. His expression softened, and he shook his head slightly, as if he was still processing what had just happened. "Well," he said, a hint of a rueful smile on his lips, "that was not how I expected this to go." The tension broke, and the audience burst into applause. They were not just clapping for Mark. They were clapping because he had stood his ground, because he had refused to let someone, no matter how famous or important they thought they were, treat him or his show with contempt. He had shown grace under pressure, and people respected that. Mark raised a hand to quiet the applause. "I want to say something," he continued. "I have nothing but respect for anyone who is trying to make a positive difference in the world. And I know that Prince Harry has done important work in many areas. But respect has to go both ways. It does not matter who you are or where you come from. If you cannot show basic kindness and respect to the people around you, then we have a problem." The audience nodded, murmuring in agreement. Mark had not attacked Harry personally. He had not stooped to his level. He had simply held a line, a boundary that should never have been crossed in the first place. "Now," Mark said, his smile returning, "we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to continue with some great conversations and some fun segments, because that is what this show is about. Connection, joy, learning from each other, and we are not going to let one bad moment define us." The audience applauded again, this time with even more energy. They were with Mark. They believed in what he stood for, and as the cameras cut to commercial, Mark walked off the stage, his head held high, knowing that he had done the right thing. Backstage, the atmosphere was electric. The producers were already fielding calls from news outlets wanting to know what had happened. The crew members who had witnessed the confrontation were still in shock, replaying every word in their minds. One of the younger production assistants approached Mark as he walked down the hallway. "Mark, are you okay?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Mark nodded, giving her a reassuring smile. "I am fine. Thank you for asking. That was not easy, but it needed to happen." "I cannot believe he spoke to you like that," she said, shaking her head. "You were so calm. I do not know how you did it." "Because getting angry would not have helped," Mark replied. "Sometimes the best way to deal with someone who is trying to provoke you is to stay grounded, to not give them the reaction they are looking for, and to stand firm in your values." She smiled at him, admiration clear in her eyes. "Well, you definitely did that." As Mark made his way to his dressing room, he thought about everything that had just transpired. He thought about Harry, about the anger and bitterness that had poured out of him. Part of Mark felt sad about it. He had genuinely wanted to have a meaningful conversation. He had wanted to give Harry a platform to share his message, to connect with people who might be inspired by his work. But Harry had not wanted that. He had come onto the show with his own agenda, his own grievances, and he had let them poison what could have been a positive experience. Mark also thought about the audience, about the people who had taken time out of their day to be there, to witness something special. They had not signed up to watch a confrontation. They had come for inspiration, for entertainment, for connection. And in the end, Mark hoped that they had still found something valuable in what happened. Not in the conflict itself, but in the way it was handled. in the reminder that dignity and respect matter, no matter the circumstances. When the show resumed after the commercial break, Mark was back in his element. He introduced the next segment with his usual warmth and energy, and the audience responded in kind. There was a sense of camaraderie in the studio now, a feeling that they had all been through something together and had come out stronger on the other side. The rest of the show went smoothly. Mark interviewed a young entrepreneur who had started a nonprofit to provide clean water to underserved communities. He laughed with a comedian who had a hilarious story about a disastrous family vacation. He even took questions from the audience, answering them with the same thoughtfulness and humor that had made him a beloved figure in daytime television. But even as the show continued, the confrontation with Harry lingered in the background. Everyone knew that the footage would be everywhere within hours. Social media would explode. News outlets would dissect every word, every gesture, every facial expression. There would be think pieces and opinion columns and endless debates about who was right and who was wrong. Mark knew all of this. He had been in the industry long enough to understand how these things worked. But he was not worried. He had done what he believed was right. He had stood up for himself and for the integrity of his show. And he had done it with grace and composure. That was all he could control. As the show wrapped up and the audience filed out, many of them stopped to shake Mark's hand or give him a quick hug. They thanked him for handling the situation the way he did. They told him they were proud of him, and those small moments of connection, those genuine expressions of support, meant more to Mark than any headline or viral video ever could. Later that evening, Mark sat in his office, scrolling through the inevitable flood of reactions online. Some people praised him. Some people criticized him. Some people defended Harry, saying he had been unfairly treated or that Mark had overreacted. But Mark was not looking for validation from strangers on the internet. He knew his truth. He knew what had happened in that studio. One of the producers knocked on his door and poked her head in. "Hey, Mark. Just wanted to check in. How are you holding up?" "I am good," Mark said, looking up from his phone. "Really, I am." "The network is fully behind you, by the way," she said. "They watched the whole thing, and they think you handled it perfectly. They are not concerned about any backlash." Mark nodded. "That is good to hear. But honestly, I would have done the same thing regardless. Some things are not negotiable." She smiled. "That is why people love you, Mark. You are the real deal." After she left, Mark leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about all the interviews he had done over the years, all the people he had met, all the stories he had heard. Most of them had been wonderful experiences. Moments of laughter and learning and genuine human connection. This was different. This was a reminder that not every interaction would go according to plan. That sometimes people would bring their pain and their anger to the table, and it would spill over in ways that were uncomfortable and messy. But it was also a reminder of why boundaries matter, why respect matters, why treating people with dignity, regardless of their status or fame, is not just a nice idea, but a fundamental necessity. Mark had learned that lesson long ago, and he had no intention of forgetting it now. The next day, the headlines were everywhere. Prince Harry kicked off talk show after explosive altercation. Mark Consuelos stands his ground against royal outburst. Watch, the moment everything went wrong. The video clips were shared millions of times. People analyzed every second, every word, every expression. But Mark did not dwell on it. He showed up to work the next day, ready to do his job, ready to have more conversations, to meet more guests, to create more moments of connection with his audience. Because that was what mattered. Not the drama, not the controversy, but the work itself. The opportunity to bring people together, to share stories, to make a small difference in someone's day. And as he walked onto the stage that morning, greeted by the familiar sound of applause, he felt grateful. Grateful for the opportunity. grateful for the support, and grateful for the reminder that sometimes standing up for what is right means standing alone, even if just for a moment. Because in the end, that moment had defined something important. Not just about Mark, but about the values he refused to compromise, about the standards he held for himself and for anyone who stepped onto his stage, and about the simple, powerful truth that respect is not optional.